riots in KwaZulu-Natal by FreeZuma protesters, of course, have quickly escalated, and they've drawn in opportunistic criminals and, it has to be said, hungry people as well. At least 6 people confirmed dead in the 2 provinces. The army now coming in to help the police quell the violence. Well, what does it take to get a community to act as one and begin looting? Should the authorities have anticipated this? I'm joined now by Camaren Peter, Associate Professor at UCT's Graduate School of Business, also Director and Executive Head of the Centre for Analytics and Behavioural Change. Prof, thank you so much for your time this evening. I mean, it's extraordinary, the scenes that we are seeing. How do you understand what you see playing out?
Well, Sally, firstly, I'd like to just express my sympathy and solidarity with all those who are affected right now. I mean, I see this as a failure of our politics, and in particular of our politicians, who've repeatedly failed to come together to solve some of the critical problems that we face as a society, and have been inward-looking and mainly obsessed with their own political infighting, purely for personal gain, to gain power.
Do you think these protests are a sign that Jacob Zuma is still a really powerful man with huge support?
I'm very hesitant to say that it's huge support. I think that will play out over the next few weeks, or perhaps even the next few months. We'll see the depth of the support that Jacob Zuma has, both in terms of popular support, but also within the ANC itself. Because quite frankly, the only route to power is through the ANC and control over it.
What is the narrative emerging from these riots? Is it telling a story of Zuma, or is it more telling a story of unemployed young people who are disenchanted, who see that a lot of people seem to be able to break the law and get away with it, and they see an opportunity for their moment to get something?
Well, I see it as, a byproduct of the extreme inequality that we live in South Africa, characterized in particular by high unemployment amongst our youth bulge, and with that a disillusionment with establishment, politics, as well as academia, as well as the media, as well as civil society, where people are disengaged from the key institutions that produce a democracy. And so when that disengagement occurs, it's very easy for populist rhetoric and invective to take center stage and to sway people, into believing things that, quite frankly, are conspiracist rubbish.
And is there a sense of is it very emotional what is going on? And I ask this because on one level, it makes no sense to destroy shops belonging to people you may know, to destroy property that you might need, property that might have to be built up again with money. The point made by one of our previous guests, that money that's going to be, should have been used for service delivery. It seems counterintuitive. Is it something to do with when you get together with a group of people you feel invincible? Is it that sense of nothing belongs to me anyway, so I don't care what I destroy?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, so I wouldn't answer that confidently. But what I can say is that once a fire is lit, it gets a momentum of its own. And this is nothing new in South African politics. To all of us who are middle-aged and older, we've lived through precisely these kinds of periods of unrest before, living through 2 states of emergency in the 1980s in KwaZulu-Natal. And it was exactly the same pattern that plays out. It's just deeply distressing and completely unnecessary, but it is a feature of South African politics, whether at the local scales or whether widespread like it is now.
Do you think that this could have been prevented? And I'm thinking practically now, like when level 4 was announced 2 weeks ago, if the president had said, because we're going back to level 4 and it's economically difficult for people who live hand to mouth, I'm going to reinstate the 350 Rand grant until we're through this rough patch. Do you think that might have helped quell some of what we're seeing today?
I'm not sure, but I would say that anything that we can do to help people who are in need, especially through the period that we're living through right now, should just be welcomed.
Absolutely.
People need help surviving this.
Yeah. That's true. Of course, there is a bigger picture economically. So there's the concern about people who have very little, but there's the bigger picture. It's how South Africa looks to the rest of the world at a time when we're trying to interest foreigners in investing in our country. Are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in a way?
Yes, we are. But I think there's an agenda behind it because, bringing about instability, there's definitely people who have something to gain through that. And it's all about getting access to political power within the ANC itself. All you've got to look at is who stands to gain the most from this.
So you tell me, what do you think? What's the agenda?
Well, I think it's quite simple. It's to destabilize the ANC from within by destabilizing the country so that there's a show of no confidence in its leadership. And then to petition, exactly as we've seen, petition for a new leadership of the ANC who will exonerate or pardon those who have been accused of state capture and corruption. And we'll be back in the same boat we were under the presidency of Jacob Zuma.
You know, it was really interesting. Last week I interviewed Patricia de Lille, who, as you know, when she was a member of the PAC, blew the whistle on the arms deal corruption in 1999, was booed out of Parliament, went through death threats. And the point she said was, if we dealt with the arms deal case properly, we would never have had a state capture problem. Do you think South Africa's ready to learn that lesson and deal with it? Because some would say, let's just let Zuma out of prison and calm all this down.
No, I think South Africans have learned enough about what happens when you compromise and you don't follow through on what the key purpose of our institutions are there to do, which is to prosecute people who are accused of corruption and to bring them to book. Otherwise, there's no point in actually having those institutions. We can't let the political realm dictate what happens to independent state institutions. It's just a death blow to a democracy to allow that to happen.
The President's due to speak at 8 o'clock tonight. What do you hope to hear from him? What do you think would be the most sensible response to what we've seen?
Oh, that's a difficult question, but I think he needs to really take control of the situation, give the guarantees we need that law and order will be returned as soon as possible, and he needs to take every measure to be able to do that. With as little loss of life as possible, I would say, and with as little, violence as possible, because that violence, once it occurs, will become part of a conspiracist narrative to undermine the ANC's leadership from within.
All right. Well, thank you very much for chatting to us this evening. That was Professor Camaren Peter from UCT's Graduate School of Business.